Hi, today I will be explaining why Britain and France pursued a policy of appeasement in the 1930s and what effects this policy had on international relations. Appeasement was a strategy of avoiding conflict by giving in some of the demands of aggressive powers, especially Nazi Germany. One major reason was the impact of economic weaknesses. The Great Depression has severely damaged both countries economically, limiting their ability to prepare for war. Governments prioritized economic recovery and protecting trade rather than engaging in costly military conflict. This made leaders more willing to compromise rather than confront aggressive actions. Public opinion was another important factor. The memory of World War I was still very strong, and many people feared another devastating war. This created widespread support for peaceful solutions, even if it meant making concessions. Leaders in both Britain and France were under pressure to avoid conflict at almost any cost. Military weakness was also a key role. Neither country felt truly prepared for war in the early 1930s. France focused on defense, building fortifications like the Maginot Line, and while Britain's military was limited and overstretched, without strong military confidence, both countries were reluctant to take direct action against aggression. Another reason for appeasement was the fear of communism. Many leaders saw Hitler's Germany as a barrier against the spread of Soviet communism. Because of this, they were more willing to tolerate German expansion, believing it might help a greater threat. Appeasement can be clearly seen in how Britain and France responded to Hitler's actions. While Germany remilitarized the Rhineland in 1936, both countries chose not to act, even though it violated the Treaty of Versailles. This lack of response encouraged Hitler to become more confident in his actions. The policy continued with the Anschluss. When Germany annexed Austria in 1938, again Britain and France protested but took no action. They justified the union by claiming it was free of violence. This showed that they were willing to accept further expansion in order to avoid conflict. The most significant example of appeasement was the Munich Agreement in 1938. Britain and France agreed to let Germany take the Sudetenland from Czechoslovakia in exchange for Hitler's promise to make no further demands. At the time, this was seen as a success because it avoided a war. People even celebrated Neville Chamberlain for his diplomacy. But it came at a major cost. Czechoslovakia was weakened and left vulnerable, and Hitler's promises were soon broken. The effects of appeasement were largely negative. In short term, it delayed war and gave Britain and France more time to prepare militarily. However, in the long term, it encouraged further aggression. Even concession made Hitler more confident and convinced him that Britain and France would not resist. Appeasement also weakened international cooperation. It undermined the League of Nations and damaged trust between countries, especially with the Soviet Union, which had felt excluded and suspicion of Western intentions. All of this would culminate to lead to the events that would begin World War II. When Hitler finally set his eyes on Poland, he would expect for appeasement to be followed the same way again as it had been the last times. However, this time Britain and France were done with appeasing, and it would eventually lead to what would happen in World War II.